Welcome back to the Deep Dive, Diplomacy and International Relations. If you're tracking global affairs and want the most critical analysis of geopolitical shifts, well, you are in the right place. We're so glad you're here. And remember, if you want more of these deep dives, you can subscribe on platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It's a small monthly fee, but it really helps us keep the lights on and get you access to extra episodes. You can find that link right in the description. Today, we are examining one of the most stunning strategic pivots in modern Europe, the transformation of Denmark. For decades, it was sort of the definition of the reluctant EU partner, always standing with one foot out the door.
Right.
Now, they've scrapped their defense, opt-out, hiked spending to, frankly, unprecedented levels, and are stepping into a strategic leadership role. It's a huge change.
It's more than just a policy change. It's like a national psychological reset. And for anyone interested in how international organizations function under pressure, this case is.
Yeah.
It's gold.
So how should we be thinking about this?
We have to analyze it through the lens of what you could call institutional inconsistency or, on a national level, cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
Denmark has been one of the most prosperous and integrated EU members, right? Benefiting massively from the single market, from Schengen. But at the same time, it deliberately maintained this strategic distance with these key opt-outs.
And the defense one was the big one.
It was the central, and as it turned out, the unsustainable contradiction.
Okay, let's unpack that historical context first.
Right.
To really get the magnitude of this 2022 reversal, we have to go back 30 years.
We do. We have to go back to the defining moment of Danish ambivalence, the surprising rejection of the Maastricht Treaty in 1992.
Surprising is an understatement, wasn't it?
Oh, it was an institutional crisis for the EU. Here was this treaty designed to deepen European integration, overwhelmingly supported by the Danish parliament. 130 MPs were ready to ratify it.
And then the people voted.
And the Danish electorate rejected it. By a razor-thin margin, 50.7% voting? No. The difference was just, 46,847 votes. But that was enough. It brought the entire European project to a halt.
And it forced Brussels to renegotiate.
Yeah.
Just for this one small country.
It did. And that's where the Edinburgh Agreement comes in, hammered out later that year. It was the pragmatic solution that basically institutionalized Denmark's semi-detached status.
And this gave them those famous 4 opt-outs.
Exactly. These non-negotiable bypass lanes. First, the Economic and Monetary Union, the EMU, so no obligation to adopt the euro.
Right.
Second, and this is the key one for our story, the Common Security and Defense Policy, CSDP. It meant no participation in EU military operations. None.
Okay. What were the other 2?
Justice and Home Affairs, or JHA. And finally, union citizenship. These 4 points allowed the Danes to finally say yes to Maastricht on their second try.
That EMU opt-out, the Euro one, immediately sets up what people call the Danish paradox, doesn't it?
It really does. It's the definition of this contradiction in practice. Denmark is this incredibly prosperous international economy, but it keeps its own currency, the krone.
But the krone isn't fully independent.
Not at all. The catch is that the krone operates on a fixed exchange rate tied directly to the euro through something called ERM2.
So they refuse to join the club, but they are forced to wear the club uniform.
That's a perfect way to put it. They have to follow the European Central Bank's monetary policy almost religiously, but they have zero formal influence over the ECB's decisions.
And they've stuck with that choice.
They have. Even in 2000, they held another referendum to drop the euro opt-out, and voters rejected it again. 53.2% no. The national flag on the currency just mattered more.
So this state of calculated contradiction persisted for 30 years.
Yeah.
But then comes the shock that breaks the whole system.
The 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Right.
That invasion changed everything. Fundamentally. Suddenly, the strategic cost of not participating in European defense, it just became too high.
It was no longer a quirk.
It was a strategic vulnerability, and Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen, she saw that the crisis created this unique political window to finally resolve that dissonance.
And the referendum that followed, it wasn't just a political win, it was historic.
It was decisive in a way no previous Danish EU referendum had ever been. On June 1st, 2022, the vote to abolish the defense opt-out passed with a staggering 66.87% yes vote.
Wow.
Just contrast that with the 50.7%, no, just 3 decades earlier. Over 1.8 million Danes voted yes. This is the first time Denmark had ever voted to abolish one of its prized opt-outs.
That contrast is just...
Yeah.
It's profound. So what was the one factor that you think really bridged that gap for the public?
Clarity of threat. It's as simple as that. The political rationale was impossible to ignore. Russia's war made Denmark's refusal to participate in common European defense completely untenable.
And the Prime Minister is very direct about it?
Very pointed. She said the vote sent a clear signal to Vladimir Putin. It was the moment Denmark officially stopped being a reluctant partner.
And the political coalition backing this was huge. It wasn't really a partisan fight.
Absolutely not. The Yes campaign had this broad, multi-party defense agreement. The governing Social Democrats, Venstre, the Conservatives. The center was completely united.
And the no side?
It was trounced. It was just the Danish People's Party on the right and the Red-Green Alliance on the far left.
Okay, so beyond the vote itself, the immediate consequence was a complete rethinking of Denmark's strategic priorities. What does this new posture actually look like?
It looks like high-level strategic leadership. They've shed that image of the passive recipient of EU benefits, and now they're actively shaping the agenda.
And we can see that in their plans for the EU Council Presidency.
For sure. Their 2025 presidency is already titled A Strong Europe in a Changing World. The focus is explicitly on security and competitiveness.
And the financial commitment is, well, it's dramatic. Historically, Denmark spent maybe 1.5% of GDP on defense.
Now that figure is just exploding. Thanks to a new defense agreement, the Acceleration Fund, spending is set to temporarily rise to around 3% of GDP in 2025 and 26.
3%. That puts them among the top spenders in NATO, way over the 2% minimum.
It does, but their long-term goal is even more ambitious. The government is planning to meet a new NATO target for total spending on defense and security. That includes things like cybersecurity and resilience of 5% of GDP by 2035.
5%.
5%. And to support that, they're making fundamental societal changes. They're extending conscription to 11 months and, notably, introducing conscription for women starting in 2026. This is a profound shift.
This strategic pivot is also causing ripples in areas you wouldn't expect, like fiscal policy. Denmark has long been a core member of the Frugal Four bloc in the EU.
This is where the shift gets really interesting for policy wonks. The Frugal Four, Austria, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Denmark were always the institutional brake on EU spending.
But not anymore.
Not on this issue. PM Frederiksson has publicly said she's ready to abandon that tight budget policy when it comes to defense. She even signaled support for something that was previously unthinkable in Copenhagen.
Common EU debt.
Exactly. The possibility of common EU debt for defense needs. For a country that prides itself on having the EU's largest budget surplus for 6 years running, that is a total inversion of their traditional stand.
That's fascinating. So they are trading that fiscal prudence for strategic security.
Yeah.
But let's look at the economics. When a country ramps up defense spending this much, you'd expect a huge domestic stimulus, right? And probably inflation.
That is the expected scenario, but the data suggests the economic impact will be surprisingly moderate, at least domestically.
How so?
Projections show that meeting the core defense spending target will only increase real GDP by about 1% and consumer prices by about 1% by 2029.
Wait, so they're spending all this money, but most of it is stimulating foreign economies, not their own.
In a nutshell, yes. There's a lot of what we call economic leakage, and there are two main reasons for it. First, a huge portion of their spending has been direct military and financial aid to Ukraine.
So that money leaves the country immediately.
Right. It's a transfer abroad. From 2022 to 2025, that aid alone was over 3% of Denmark's GDP. Second, Denmark doesn't have a large domestic defense industry.
I see.
So they have to buy their equipment from other countries, with the USA historically being the largest supplier. The investment solves the security problem, but the economic dividends mostly go elsewhere.
Meanwhile, they're facing these unique geopolitical challenges, especially in the Arctic, that really demand this new posture.
Correct. The Arctic is critical for Denmark because of Greenland, and they're facing major competition from Russia and China. So they're boosting their military presence there, new naval vessels, long-range drones, you name it.
And this situation was made acutely worse by an ally, right? When the previous U.S. administration threatened to, well, take over Greenland.
That pressure was unprecedented.
Yeah.
It really forced Denmark to realize that relying only on traditional alliances wasn't enough. So what did they do? They leveraged their growing EU role.
So they turned to Europe for backup.
Exactly. You saw French President Emmanuel Macron visiting Greenland with the Danish PM, signaling European solidarity. It's a clear trade-off. Deeper EU defense integration is buying them critical geopolitical leverage.
So if we step back, Denmark had the financial room to make this pivot, thanks to years of conservative fiscal policy and those big budget surpluses.
That financial stability is the critical foundation. We can synthesize the whole thing here. The abolition of the defense opt-out is a textbook case of integration through crisis.
Right.
An external shock forces the resolution of these institutional inconsistencies when the strategic cost of maintaining the contradiction just becomes too high to bear.
So that raises the final question for you, the listener. You've scrapped the defense opt-out, but what about the three that are left? Justice and Home Affairs,
Yeah.
the EMU, and Union citizenship.
That's the lingering question. Danish Euroscepticism is fundamentally sovereignty-based. The fear is that integration makes them less Danish, not that it makes them poorer.
But the security threat overcame that.
It did. The successful, unified resolution of the defense issue sets a powerful precedent. So if we look ahead, you have to ask, given Denmark's shift from being a reluctant partner to a primary strategic leader, will the next inevitable crisis, be it economic, another debt crisis, or a major environmental shock force, a final resolution to the Danish paradox? Will that crisis be the thing that pushes Denmark to voluntarily abandon that sacred euro opt-out and accept full monetary integration, finally completing its journey into the heart of the European project?
That is a provocative thought to mull over. The security crisis changed Denmark forever. We'll be watching to see if the next major crisis changes them again. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Denmark's remarkable strategic evolution. If you learned something surprising today, please share this with a friend who follows international relations, and take a moment to rate us 5 stars. That rating is the single best way to help this show reach even more people interested in policy deep dives like this one. We'll be back soon with more of your sources. Until then, stay well informed.